With every Nintendo console, there should be a defining Zelda title to go along with it. A game that just encapsulates that generation for Nintendo in a nutshell of Zelda goodness. And there's no denying that Skyward Sword is the Wii's defining Zelda. I understand opinions on the titles are mixed, and even I didn't find myself liking it when I first played it, as compared to the other 3D titles, it was weird, especially the combat when I couldn't get used to the motion controls, but eventually, something finally clicked. Suddenly, what was the most awkward 3D Zelda game ever became a bit of a breath of fresh air, though still a slightly awkward game at times. Of course, the game is a beautiful art style and a godly soundtrack, but it's also one of the few games that I feel completely justifies the Wii's motion controls. I never felt silly while playing the game. Looked it? Sure, but I didn't feel silly and I was having fun. And fun makes me happy. Plus, I managed to wiggle my way into this unfinished area of the game with all these 2D trees. So that's great. And so today on Gaming Mysteries, as a little break from Halloween, still doing a Halloween video by the way, don't worry, but today on Gaming Mysteries, I'll be talking about the beta and development of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Now, of course, rumors of the new Zelda game started immediately after the Wii's launch, because people really like Zelda, and our first bit of info on the title would end up being revealed by Aonuma in a private meeting during E3 2007. At the time, the game was simply called Zelda Wii, and Aonuma stated that it was to have a completely new control style for the game, and that they wanted to implement one-to-one swordplay. He also stated that he'd like to make the game appeal to both casual and hardcore gamers. A dangerous task to undertake. Development of the title began later that year after the release of Phantom Hourglass, though shortly after its development began, the team also began to work on Spirit Tracks as well, working on both games at once. Although focus was given to Spirit Tracks because for a while, Nintendo wasn't really sure what to do with Zelda Wii. Yes, they had the intention of one-to-one swordplay, though that's a task easier said than done. Despite technically being in development for about 5 years, 2-ish of those years were mostly spent experimenting with various ideas, a process that didn't actually go too well, with Miyamoto even admitting that Skyward Sword suffered from franchise fatigue during its development. To quote him, "It's occasionally the case during game development that the project doesn't proceed along as planned or doesn't turn out as fun as expected when you want it. This Zelda had some of those problems." And this is followed up with a more interesting quote. "We ran into this issue of people wondering who really wanted to make a Zelda sequel, whether a sequel was necessary from the company's standpoint or whether it's just me saying, let's do it." And I just want to interject real quick and say, I love it when Miyamoto just does it. To continue though, a game really gets its start when you have someone say, I want to do something like this, but sometimes it's born simply because it's a series title or there's more story to cover. For us, games provide a structure to play, and if you're making a sequel, you have to find that desire to improve, strengthen, and expand things right at the core of the project. So basically, the way Miyamoto likes to go about making games is finding an interesting concept and building the game around that concept. In this case, we have motion controls, and Aonuma already has a concept, swordplay with motion controls, which means they were having a really hard time actually making that work. Even with the release of the Wii Motion Plus, the team wasn't able to implement it in ways that they wanted to, so for a while there they actually decided to not use Wii Motion Plus at all and were going to move on to something completely different, until seeing it implemented into the sword fighting for Wii Sports Resort, which made them realize that the motion controls could be implemented in a way that would allow people to use the sword freely and naturally. So they straight up borrowed that technology and began to work it into the new Zelda game. And so, at the next year's E3, Miyamoto confirmed that a new Zelda game was finally in development, until later that year in which the game was still in the planning stages. But Miyamoto promised more information would be revealed in 2009. And so E3 came and went, and no Zelda, but we did get this really awesome looking picture. Truth be told though, Nintendo probably could have shown off the game in 2009. Their claim as to not doing so was that the graphics weren't advanced enough to where they would actually want to show it off. And that's a fair reason to not show something off, though personally I think Nintendo is just starting to wise up and won't show us early stuff at E3 anymore. Hell, Nintendo Direct pretty much makes presentations obsolete at this point. Either way, since the game was only publicly displayed late in its development as opposed to other Zelda games, there isn't a ton of pictures or beta footage lying around at all, but we're gonna work with what we have. and as Skyward Sword was finally shown off at E3 2010, it was glorious. First, Miyamoto was huge, and then he walked out of himself. He's my inspiration. And while the demo was shaky, the trailer was cool and the game looked good, though while watching the trailer you can spot some differences between it and the final game. Now we have your basic placeholder stuff. Link is using the Himalayan shield and Master Sword in what looks like a very early section of the game where he shouldn't have it. Big whoop. Bigger whoop, you can see right here that Link doesn't have to hold his sword skyward to charge up the Skyward Strike. And Link also has no shield gauge, which is great because screw that. Moldarok, a boss that appears in Lanryu mining facility, is instead seen here in what looks like Skyview Temple. Speaking of that temple though, it was originally just called Sky Temple. Creative name. You have different icons for certain items like the bow, slingshot, and the whip. More interesting to note regarding the whip was that initially it was called the Skull Whip and looked like its name. Why you wouldn't want a badass Skull Whip is beyond me, but there's also an eye gate, normally located within the temple, but it's outside instead. Some believe that it may have held some secret within Faron Woods. Now it could very well be that things like the shield gauge being omitted or the eye door that's outside were just there for the sake of letting people try out the new control scheme, and not have to deal with any aspects of the game that would bog down the experience, though that's just a hypothetical on my part. Beyond the trailer, a screenshot also provides a bit of altered content, as we have this map, which I believe is the one they were using for E3, the Faron Woods-esque place. While this exact location didn't make it into the game, it's safe to assume we didn't miss out on anything too special here, considering it's probably just a sectioned off version of Faron Woods. So with that in mind, let's get into some unused concept and concept art. And we're going to go ahead and start with the art. Numerous characters underwent slight changes. Here we have an early version of Zelda in a different set of clothes, an early version of Groose, who's recolored himself. He would. Two early versions of Girahim, one displaying a different cape, the other displaying a different version of his final form. We also have a darker design for Demise, an early, more cartoonish version of the Loftwing, which actually made its way into the game somehow. Besides those, we have this slightly older, more realistic version of Link, which makes me think that perhaps at one point the art style was going to be a tad more reminiscent to Twilight Princess, though just a tad. Now as far as unused content goes, we have this amazing test room and this black stone, which are beautiful. Something that some of you may find more beautiful, or tragic, is that according to Miyamoto, Skyward Sword was originally a much more challenging game. If this is indeed true, the toned-down difficulty would fit in with the appealing to both a hardcore and casual audience, which kinda makes me sad. But aside from this, Aonuma confirmed that they had a ton of ideas for various items that were to appear in Skyward Sword, but they for whatever reason just couldn't get them to work within this particular game. He went on to say that those items could very well appear in the next Zelda game, whenever the hell that comes out. Either way, I'll buy it, as I'm a Zelda-loving sheep. But that was the beta and development of Skyward Sword. Now, I can't really say I'm that bummed about the omissions, unless that shield thing was true, because it got to the point where I wasn't even using the damn thing. It broke. But I felt, for what the game set out to do, Skyward Sword was great. Is it perfect? God no! I'm running through this unfinished land over here with the 2D trees, and yeah, it's a more easy game compared to the other titles in the series, but I just hit my keyboard and I had a lot of fun with the game. Not the keyboard though, I'm gonna leave that in. But since all I really want from a video game is fun, for me, that's a win. This has been Gaming Mysteries. Thank you for watching. Welcome back to a super Halloween edition of Endslate, where I just did a video on the beta of Skyward Sword, which has nothing to do with Halloween because I was working on 2 videos at once and I got distracted, so the Halloween video kind of got delayed by a couple of days. I'm sorry about that, but that'll be up next week sometime. Don't worry about it, guys. I didn't forget about it, but I hope you enjoyed the Gaming Mysteries on Skyward Sword for the Wii, because I made that. I got distracted by that bad. I do hope you enjoyed the video, though. Yeah, happy Halloween! Skyward Sword. Anyways, videos to recommend, because it's Halloween. I don't want to lollygag. Everyone got trick-or-treating to do, or, nothing. I'm gonna do nothing. But here's some things you can click on to do nothing. One is going to be the last video I did on this channel, which was a gaming mysteries on the beta of Dead Rising, the first Dead Rising game I love. So there's that, and then the other thing I'd like to recommend is a bullshit creepypasta story time on ZAI. I thought it was appropriate to suggest a Zelda creepypasta that I did during the month of October for this Zelda video, so that seemed fitting. And as to the bottom of the screen, if you enjoy the videos I make and you want to stick around and watch more, or you know, like the videos or any of that stuff that people always beg you to do with the sharing and the other stuff, you're free to do so, but it's not required. You guys know the drill by now. I don't force that stuff on anyone. But happy Halloween, guys. I'm gonna go to bed and try and fix my sleep schedule. So again, I hope you enjoyed the video. Happy Halloween. Be safe. If someone puts like a blade in candy, call the cops. Little tip. Bye, guys.